We face a series of crises that have been allowed to fester and grow, including a homelessness crisis, the lack of affordable housing and living wages, and a climate emergency. We need bold action, and we need it now. I believe in the basic tenets of the Democratic Party when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's time that we uplift some new voices from some other backgrounds, from some other lived experiences to represent us here in the most diverse district of our state. And lastly, and most importantly, I think it's time that we end this oligarchy, this rule by elite multimillionaire career politicians, and replace them with citizen representatives who know the struggle, who won't take corporate contributions, and who will truly represent and fight for the people. Especially today, looking at the news that we had with our dear friend Bernie stepping down from the presidential campaign, it only means that we need to fight that much harder. We need to make sure that we have more citizen voices in Congress to help him move the agenda and make sure that we have a government that works for all of us and not just those few at the very top.
Excellent. And Michaela, why don't you talk a little bit about your campaign?
Yeah, so I'm running for Congress in Maryland's 5th Congressional District, posing a primary challenge to Steny Hoyer. And I'm running for Congress, not because I want to, but because I have to, because we have to have transformative change. And I was someone who felt hopeless because of the current state of our political system. We have a political system that is not focused on people, it's focused on corporations. And we can see that now during this coronavirus pandemic, where we have, Congress and the White House and everyone's trying to figure out how to put together these stimulus packages, where if we had a government that was focused more on regular people, then we would already be, protected. If we already had PTO, if we already had a universal basic income, if we already had single payer health care, debt-free college, tuition-free college, universal school lunch. And so I'm really running for Congress because people like us have been left out of the conversation for so long that we thought that all of the messed up things that happened to us were just normal, and it's not. And so I'm running to basically create a new normal for regular people and finally have a government that puts people first.
Excellent. And we're also joined by Dash. Dash, if you want to do just a little quick introduction.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Dash. I'm Michaela's campaign manager. I'll also be moderating, just scanning all the platforms. So this is currently being streamed on Michaela's Twitter, on Albert's Twitter, as well as several other platforms as well. So you can ask questions anywhere that you're seeing this right now, and we will be scanning and we will be looking for the questions to ask.
Thanks so much, Dash. And I'm Sam. I'm part of the Albert Lee campaign, and I will be moderating today. So first of all, you two are both big fans of Bernie Sanders. Today is a rough day for you and for all of us, as he announced that he would be dropping out of the race today. With Bernie Sanders' announcement, how is your campaign affected going forward?
Do you want to go first?
The way that our campaign is going to be affected, I really think it's unfortunate that Bernie dropped out today, first of all, because he's the one, he's the reason why I'm even involved in politics in the first place, and the reason why I'll continue to be involved in politics and continue to advocate for my community. But I really think that it is going to impact campaigns like both mine and Albert Lee's in the most positive way ever, because it just shows that we have to fight even harder now, for Bernie's policies and to get these ideas into the halls of Congress. I mean, today alone, our volunteer numbers have spiked, our fundraising numbers have spiked. And, people are disappointed that Bernie has decided to suspend his campaign, but everyone's eager now more than ever to continue on the fight, because Bernie was only the leader of this movement. The movement is way bigger than Bernie, and that's why he says, not me, us. And so we just have to carry that legacy on.
Amen to that. I mean, seriously, for me, 2015 was the first time I ever donated to a politician, because before that, I looked at politicians as liars, thieves, and crooks. It was Bernie Sanders who, for me, was working for the people. He's been working for the people for his entire lifetime. He is quintessentially not a politician. He is what we need. He was the one that inspired me to contribute money, to knock on doors, to volunteer, to phone bank, and from there got activated within my community, both civically and politically. That's why I'm here today. That's why Michaela's here today. He has been the inspiration to a lot of us. Him stepping down, here's the thing. We don't believe in demigods or gods or rock stars. You know, he was a moral leader for the left, but that does not mean that this is about Bernie. Again, like Michaela said, it's not me, it's us. For this campaign, for Michaela's campaign, we have both seen spikes when it comes to volunteers, interest, contributions, because there's an understanding that it's not just the presidential campaign that is important. It is all the down ballot races that are important. We need to flip the Senate. We need to flip red districts blue, and we need to make blue districts bluer. And that's where we're at with me and Michaela. We've got folks that have been in for 20 and 40 years that have been towing the company line, that have been towing the corporate line, not really helping the people. It's time that we have citizen representatives who know the struggle, who are going to truly help the people. And so I'm fired up. I know people are fired up. Look, it was a punch in the gut this morning when we heard the news. I'm not going to lie. I felt, you know, denial, anger, frustration. But in the end, you got to think about the bigger perspectives here. You got to think about everything that is this movement. And it is not just one person. Next man up, next woman up. We need to continue to fight. We need to continue to get a government that's going to work for all of us and not just those few at the top.
Absolutely. However, some progressives, including both Bernie and AOC, are making it clear that defeating Trump is the most important thing this election. However, many Bernie supporters believe that Joe Biden doesn't deserve their vote. How are you encouraging your base to vote, and where do you see yourself when you get the ballot in your hand?
Look, you know, here's the thing. Joe is going to have to win and earn those votes. You know, just because Bernie dropped out doesn't mean that we still have 26 states, 27 states that are still in this primary. So I'm not encouraging anybody to go against voting for Bernie in the primary because we're talking about delegates to the national convention. If we even have a national convention, I still plan on voting for Bernie in the Oregon primary, period. Because there's more to it than just ensuring that that, you know, we have a presumptive presidential candidate now in Joe Biden, but we still can control the party. We still can control the agenda. We need to make sure that our Bernie-crats continue to vote for Bernie in the remaining primaries so that we have a voice in this Democratic Party.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Albert. I plan on voting for Bernie Sanders in the primary, and I too am not going to, you know, use my platform to, you know, make it seem like we owe our support to Joe Biden because it's people over party. And I feel like by doing that, I would be putting party over people. And we haven't got to vote yet here in Maryland's 5th District. And so I'm excited to vote for Bernie again this time. So yeah, I'm just encouraging people to do whatever their heart feels. I mean, if you want to vote for Joe, vote for Joe. But if you want to continue to support Bernie, then, you know, I'm definitely behind you 100%.
And where do you see yourselves in November, though?
Oh, I'm going to be honest and transparent. I don't know what I'm going to do in November. You know, today is the first day, you know, of the news coming out. So to be honest, I'm not sure what I'm going to do in November, but I know that my state is a solid blue state. And so, you know, yeah, just to be honest, I don't know.
It's okay to take your time. What about you, Albert? Where do you see yourself in November?
Again, Oregon and Maryland kind of match up here. We're both solid blue states. Regardless of what I do personally, the state is going to go down in November in the general election. I don't know what I'm going to do. Right now, I'm still in the 5 stages of grief. We'll see. I need some convincing.
Great. So for our next question, let's go to the other very big news story of the day and also the month, which of course is COVID-19. I want to ask, well, first, for anyone watching, I do encourage you to ask questions on whatever platform you're watching this on, because we are monitoring that. But yeah, I just want to ask both of you how COVID-19 has changed the way you've had to campaign. Basically, what new things are you doing or not doing as a result of that? And then also, how has it changed the message you're putting out in terms of what you're fighting for? So yeah, we can start with Michaela.
Yeah, so our campaign has had to, of course, suspend all in-person operations. So there's no more knocking on doors. We had a huge rally set up for April the 4th, which I'm so mad we didn't get to do. I was looking forward to that. But we've just transitioned to like basically a remote campaign, which is how we started off initially anyways. So we've shifted everything to like phone banking, text banking, virtual town halls such as this, just figuring out other ways to reach people in the community. I mean, one monkey don't stop no show. So, I mean, nothing's changed. We just have transitioned the way that we've reached out to everyone in the community, and I think it's going good.
Yeah, same thing here. We stopped all, we had these great plans about what we're going to do for the last 2 months of the campaign. May 19th is our primary. By the way, for those folks who are still non-affiliated voters or still Republicans, you can switch your affiliation to Democrat in order to have that choice. But you have to do it by April 28th in the 3rd district. So if you want a choice, a real choice for this district, switch to being a Democrat before April 28th. But like Michaela, we've had to go online. We're doing virtual town halls. We're doing phone banking. We're doing text banking. The only thing that we are allowed to do, we still have yard signs. So I'm personally dropping off yard signs, putting them in people's yards, because I don't want to get the rest of the crew at risk in any sort of way. So I'm not interacting with people. We tell them ahead of time, hey, I'm going to swing by. I'm going to plop a yard sign in your front yard. Good. Okay. I'm not going to be able to talk to you or shake your hand. I wish I could, but unfortunately we can't. So that's it on the physical side. But again, more town halls, more virtual meet and greets. We're doing stuff with local candidates and local officials, as well as nationwide, like this little East Coast, West Coast thing we got going on here today. And I really enjoy, Michaela, I miss you. It's been since November since I had an opportunity to see you. It was really a great time to be in DC.
I know. I'm so glad that we get to talk again.
Yeah.
Right, we've got a question from Twitter. Danny Marino asks, do you think it's possible for enough of us to truly build up a third party, whether Green, Peoples, etc.?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
My answer is going to be short. I was just going to say only time will tell. I mean, to be honest, it takes time to build viability for another third party. But I think that if enough people are upset in the Democratic Party, that it will happen. I'm not going to lie, just because I am transparent today. Hearing the news of like Bernie dropping out really made me want to wash my hands of the Democratic Party. But yeah, only time will tell.
Well, here's my answer to this. Number one, we're seeing a demonstration that we have this two-party duopoly that, I repeat this over and over again, it's two sides of the same ruling class. We don't really have a people's party. We have a Republican Party that is veering dangerously close to becoming a minority right-wing fascist party. We have a Democratic Party that continues to shift from center left to center right. And Both of those parties are corporate parties. They're based on the graph that we have, the money in politics that we have. What Bernie started in 2015 and what has continued on with the 2018 elections and now in 2020 is a rise of progressives that have come up to meet that challenge, to say, hey, we're going to try to wrest this party, pull it back to its left base, and try to affect the change, try to get this party back to caring about working class people, caring about everyday Americans. And I got to tell you, if we don't see a movement, if we don't see a good 10 or a dozen and a half progressives get into Congress, I guarantee that there'll be talk and discussion. We had that whole debate in 2018 about Dem enter versus Dem exit. I think that debate will come back. And if we do not see progressives, solid progressives coming in, I'm not talking about lip service progressives, I'm not talking about the real deal getting into Congress, I can see a breakaway, a splintering within the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. So we have a question. This is also from Twitter. It is from Leanne Conklin. She asks, how can I help? I just got the gut punch of a lifetime today, so I'm ready to fight back. And then, yeah, ask for a link, which we'll send. But yeah, I think the broader question is just how can people help right now?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of fire up the people that you know. I think that, we can only reach so many people, but people are going to trust and believe the people that they know. So you talk to your friends, your neighbors, your relatives. I mean, if you're in Michaela's district, talk about Michaela, talk about how she is going to be the true fighter that's going to support the people in Maryland. And here's the thing, even if you're not in Michaela's district or my district, we all need to support, because we have people like, if Ilhan Omar in Minnesota, her immigration policies and things that she's gotten to the table, they affect us all. The work that AOC has done affects us all. Contrarily, the lack of work and the movement toward the corporate handshakes, that affects us too. I mean, we saw that last 2 weeks where trillions of dollars were just given to Wall Street without discussion, without deliberation. So in order to protect the assets of the 1%. And then after that, we had a long deliberation about what we're going to do for the rest of us. And what ended up happening was, maybe if you qualify, you might get $1,200 sometime in May, if you qualify. And oh, by the way, while we were doing that, we're going to give another $500 billion to corporations with no strings attached. So it is really important that we do get real citizen representation, real fighters that are going to work for all of us and replace those career politicians. So what can you do? If you have the means, by all means, contribute to our campaigns. But monetary contributions isn't the only thing you can do. You can phone, bank, and text from anywhere. And we sure as hell can use the help everywhere to get the word out, because none of us are taking corporate contributions. We're 100% funded by the people. That means that we are already fighting with one hand tied behind our back. We're not going to have the funds to do all the massive exposure that we would like. So again, talk to everybody phone, bank, and text if you can. Reach out to our campaigns. We will more than gladly accept your help. And of course, if you have them funds, by all means, we'd gladly accept that as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Albert. Like, you can get involved with other down ballot races wherever in the country by phone banking. You can do that from your home. Text banking, you can do that from home. And when you phone bank and text bank, tell a friend and tell your friend to tell a friend and join. I know we do phone banks every single day of the week. We're phone banking. And also, like Albert said, we can use contributions as well. We are, essentially fighting in a race that is people versus money. but we are grassroots, so we absolutely need the money so that we can have the resources that we need in order to be successful in our campaigns. If you were ever contributing, like today we had a reoccurring donor that was a reoccurring donor to Bernie Sanders, and they suspended their reoccurring donations to Bernie Sanders and, reallocated that to our campaign. So it's doing things like that, like invest in other candidates, because we still need, those voices in Congress, regardless of who our president is going to be. But we definitely need progressive voices on all levels of government.
And if I could just add, Michaela, since I do have the website here behind me in my virtual background, Michaela 2020, both for donating and volunteering, is a great place to go. And yeah, just said, when you donate to a grassroots campaign like this, you can also rest assured, we're practicing what we preach in terms of like what we're doing with the money. So like on our campaign, we practice pay equity, like everyone gets paid the same. And since the election moved, we were like, oh my God, like we have like 9 staffers that we need to pay for 5 more weeks. But we figured out a way to make that happen thanks to, just grassroots contributors. So we didn't leave, because it's about like, also living your ideals and being a good, because like otherwise, like what's the point? Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a question from Instagram. We have, Congress has struggled so far to truly hold Trump accountable for ethics violations as he continues to fire oversight officials even to this week. What methods of keeping him in line would you seek to implement in the House?
Well, so we have seen the abdication of congressional responsibility and the usurpation of power by the executive branch for the last 40 years. When we talk about everything from the power to conduct war to the power of the purse, it seems like we have shifted this, what was supposed to be a balance between 3 branches, and shifting it more to almost a king. And we have to do everything we can to check that. I think that, it didn't start with Trump. He just happened to be the one that was bold enough to continue to keep moving forward without looking back. But through Obama, through the Bushes, everything else, we have since 2001. I mean, with World Trade Centers, we've continued to allow the presidents and the executive branch to continue to absorb more power. And now we've got effectively a demagogue that's in office who has the chutzpah to continue to move forward without any kind of check. And we have such a highly polarized congressional Congress that we have one party that just kowtows and says yes, 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 and then we have another party that just doesn't seem like they want to organize and to really fight tooth and nail. And I think that we need to have people who are going to call this out, number one, and also not be beholden to the money, because quite frankly, it's the money from K Street. It's the money that comes into politics that allows our members of Congress to look the other way, because as long as they're taken care of, maybe it's all right for them. But for the rest of us, we're seeing the destruction, and we're seeing effectively kleptocracy of our country. Trump is right now taking something straight out of Putin's playbook, firing people that have oversight over trillions of dollars, and then you look at the things that he's invested in. He keeps preaching about a piece of medication that has no efficacy when it comes to the COVID crisis, and now we find out that he has stock involved in that. So yeah, I mean, we need people that are willing to call these things out and willing to say, hey, we can't move forward until we address these things first.
Yeah, and I completely agree also. I mean, as much as we all don't like Trump, he is bold. And we need other bold people that's going to say, okay, you're bold, but I'm bold, and to call him out on every single thing that he does. And that's the benefit of having activists and organizers in the halls of Congress, because activating and organizing doesn't stop when you get elected. You can organize while you're in Congress. And that's what it's going to take, to maintain our democracy, because Trump wasn't the first and he won't be the last. But what are we going to do to change, our reactions? And when I say our, I mean, those who are the elected officials that have the ability to do that. We have checks and balances for a reason. And, if you're not going to check that so that we can get our balance back, then what are you there for? And so, I plan to continue to organize in the halls of Congress to ensure that we don't ever get stuck in a situation, like we are now. With our current president, to where, as Albert said, he's almost like a king. And so it's just going to take those bold voices, those activists. It's going to take organizing in the halls of Congress to continue to hold others accountable and to enact those checks and balances, and to not only take action when it's politically expedient, but when it's morally right.
Absolutely, yeah. So our next question is from Lena Kirby. She asks, how are you going to fight environmental racism in the US?
Well, I'm sure that Michaela can talk about this as much as I can. We've experienced this. When I was growing up, I grew up in North County, St. Louis. And, I spent a good portion of my time at my great grandpa's house. And he lived in a little village called Kinloch, which was on the other side of Ferguson from where we lived. And the thing about Kinloch was, first of all, it was the first suburb of St. Louis that allowed Black folks to move in if you could pay 6 times the market value of the house cash up front. And that's, what Black folks did. They pooled their money together to get a little piece of land, paid an exorbitant fee. And eventually that became the first Black community in St. Louis. Now, the interesting thing was when Kinloch was being built, we had the age of aircraft and flight. And well, they decided to put the airport right next door. Now, the airport slowly expanded. And by the time it expanded, all around it were enclaves of different suburbs. But when it was time to expand in the 80s and 90s, guess which way they decided to go? Through Kinloch. Now, before that, growing up there, we had the noise pollution, we had the air pollution, low air quality. It was just the rhythm of life to hear all those airplanes flying by, and to have the fumes and the smells and everything there. And then when it's time for somebody to expand or to make more money or something, then it's eminent domain. So, my great grandpa's house was an old farmhouse that was built, over 100 years ago, and he had a little bit of land, but got paid, a quarter of what it was worth, and told you got to leave. And now that whole area is destroyed. Here in Portland, we have the same thing. We had the Black community focused in areas that were unimproved. We had Vanport, which was low-lying area that ended up being flooded. Now, when the interstate came through, they decided to bisect the Black community. We have a public school, Harriet Tubman, that's just inches away from Interstate 5. And those kids are just sucking in fumes. In order to combat environmental racism, you got to see it, you got to know it, you got to understand it, and you got to have that kind of perspective. And you got to say, hey, I understand your NIMBYism, but my people have not been able to express that NIMBYism. They haven't had the power to do so. In order to combat that, you need to, first of all, bring it out to light and show it to people and say, hey, this is not right. And we're not going to do this anymore. But in order to do that, again, you got to know about it. And well, I think we know about it.
Yeah. I would say to combat environmental racism, for one, I would definitely, support a Green New Deal to bring us to 100% renewable energy. as well as making the corporations that have harmed these communities pay massive amounts in fines. Out here in our district, we have a cluster of power plants in an area that is very small, Brandywine, Maryland. It's about 72% Black.
Mhm.
And there are 5 power plants in a residential neighborhood.
And what's the
uh,
cancer rate there?
Yes, in a residential neighborhood that is about 2 to 3 miles away from an elementary school. And it's just completely unacceptable. We need to start holding these corporations accountable that is doing this to our communities, because it's not right. And also in Greenbelt, Maryland, we want to overhaul the public transportation system, of course, with the Green New Deal. But in our state, in Greenbelt, they're trying to build this high speed rail. I think it's called the maglev, which is good. It's going to be, a way to get people from Maryland to DC faster, more efficient, whatever. But the issue is they want to put this mode of public transportation in the middle of Black low income neighborhoods. And so we have to focus on smart development and ethical development, and also hold these corporations accountable, divest away from renewable energy, completely federally ban fracking across the entire United States, and just ensure that we are not putting our most vulnerable at risk, like we're doing now. Most importantly, make them pay for it and put that money into the communities that they've harmed, is the most important.
Yeah, and absolutely, and making sure that there's just compensation for those that are affected and displaced. I mean, case in point. I mean, this is historical. I mean, I noted the thing about I-5. You're talking about the maglev. It's the same story, different decade. The difference is if you're going to do that, you better compensate the people, and you better make sure that you're doing right by them.
Well, Elijah Williams asks, UBI? Question mark.
I'll let you go first.
I will go first since I brought it up. Yeah, I do think that we should have a universal basic income. That's not to say that I don't think that we should not have other social programs, because we absolutely should. But I think that a universal basic income is needed, especially at a time like now. We see that with people being laid off, losing their jobs, losing their health insurance, and just, on the brink of losing everything. And the basis of the stimulus package is similar to a UBI, right? Because they're trying to figure out how to compensate people, at this time when people are losing everything. Had we already had a universal basic income in place, then we wouldn't be struggling right now with, well, what about this money, this amount of money for, a stimulus package? And we're going to give you a one-time means tested $1,200, in September. And it's like April now. So I think that a UBI is something that will help, our society. And especially me being someone who has been on government assistance, who has gotten temporary cash assistance from the government, it's not enough. And so, I would definitely like to see, a universal basic income, especially in place of cash assistance programs, because being someone that has experienced it firsthand, being in the area where the median rent is like $1,500, and social services is telling you, okay, well, we'll give you $700 a month. Oh, and you can't get a job making minimum wage because then we're going to kick you off. Like, it's not enough. So I think that we do need a universal basic income in combination with Medicare for all, in combination with the Green New Deal, in combination with the federal jobs guarantee, and all other progressive policies that I support.
So this is where we probably disagree. And it's funny because I was talking to Lauren Ashcraft the other day, and I think that we were kind of on the same page with this. And here's the thing. First of all, right now during this emergency, we do need an emergency economic support. I say $2,000 per person per month until at least a year after the crisis is over. Period. Emergency economic support. Not the same as a UBI, because the difference, I think, is that a UBI, a universal basic income, is permanent, whereas an emergency economic support is to adjust for the specific need for today. Now, I've got a couple of different reasons why I'm wary of a UBI. I'm not saying that I'm completely against it, but I'm wary of a universal basic income for a couple of different reasons. One is the math. I know that Andrew Yang used to say, he would like to say, well, it's math, right? Well, if you do the math on his suggestion of a $1,000 UBI per person, that ends up being like $4.5 trillion, which is more than the national budget is per year, which to me would mean that is unsustainable in a long run. On the short run, in an emergency, yes, but in the long run, I'm kind of wondering if that's actually feasible. Number two, there's a dirty little secret. I've been reading about UBI from the left and from the right, and I'm afraid that a lot of people are coming to UBI from a left perspective, but what I'm afraid of is it being used as a substitute for our social safety net, because right now our social safety net is by far at the lowest place that it's been in generations. And I think that, if you're looking or suggesting that $1,000 a month is going to be able to cover all of the things that people basic needs are, that's not going to cut it. And I'm afraid that folks on the right are going to be like, well, we gave you a UBI. We don't need to worry about any kind of social safety net. We don't need to worry about unemployment insurance. We don't need to worry about, all these other things. You got your $1,000. We're all good. And so I'm really, really worried that UBI for folks that are coming from the right are going to use that as a substitute to disqualify our social safety net. So I'm really concerned about that because, again, $1,000 a person per month is $12,000. And if you're making, and they're going to use that as an excuse to not promote a living wage. They're going to be like, oh, well, we can keep the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour because, hey, you got $1,000 now. And I think that those arguments are going to rise, and I'm afraid of that. I'm really, truly afraid of that. I'm afraid that we're going to further deteriorate our social safety net, that we are going to start dismissing the calls for everything else that's needed, a universal basic, a single payer Medicare for all system, a living wage, affordable housing. They're going to be like, well, you got your $1,000. We don't need to worry about checking the housing costs or checking the minimum wage. So those are my concerns when it comes to a universal basic income. But for right now, for today, yes, we do need an emergency economic support of $2,000 per person per month until at least a year after this crisis is over. But generally speaking, I think that one of the things that we get focused on, if we focus on the UBI, we stop focusing on all of the subsidies and all of the things that are given away to corporations. We need to start checking that, because right now we've got corporations who do everything they can to reduce their tax liabilities, everything from, all of the various loopholes within the tax code to boldly and blatantly doing corporate inversions and moving their headquarters overseas. Yet at the same time, they want to afford themselves or avail themselves of the protections of the United States and the supports of the United States. So, they were the ones that wrote that $500 billion no strings attached handout to themselves. We need to put those things in check. And then we need to take that kind of those funds, and focus on shoring up and rebuilding our social safety net for the people.
And so when I say about the UBI, so our plan for UBI is more progressive, and it's called like a social wealth fund tax. So because right now the top 1% owes about 38% of the stock market. So what we want to do is radically democratize the stock market. So we would have the government buy like stocks and other financial assets, and it would essentially be like an investment fund where everyone would be a stakeholder in it over the age of 18 and would get an annual, a yearly payout of that money from the stock market.
I see. For even with that, I'm concerned about that because, what we have in the stock market are a lot of corporations that are doing a lot of things that are going against what we need. I mean, we've got a lot of fossil fuel funds out there. And so if we have the government investing funds into that, we're perpetuating the use and the delay on getting us off of the fossil fuels. Same thing when it comes to, I don't know, the airline industry or any other industry. What we need to do, I think, quite honestly, is we need to start looking at things that were once illegal and making those things illegal again. For instance, you know, corporations doing the stock buybacks. The airline industry spent the last couple of years buying back stocks so they can increase the value of those stocks. Back in the 1970s, that was illegal. You know, that was called stock manipulation. Today, they're allowed to do that, and with our CEOs being paid and compensated mainly by stock, it's a conflict of interest, and they in turn allow things to get kind of heated, and without that regulation, we get into things like the financial crisis of 2008. So I'm again wary of having the government invest into capitalism, you know, because I think that, quite honestly, capitalism is kind of one of the root issues that causes us our climate emergency with overproduction, overconsumption, and built-in obsolescence. I'm afraid that, you know, we have reached peak capitalism, and we need to start looking at and considering more collective economic systems that are going to be beneficial not only to corporate shareholders, but to everyone that's living on this planet and to the planet itself. So again, I'm not saying that I'm completely off of it. I just need to be a little bit more convinced.
Understandable.
Yeah. I bet I'm going to get flagged by a lot of UBI folks now.
You're good.
There was a disagreement that made it a lot more exciting. And yeah, I would also just add to the wealth fund is that the idea would be that you would have more of that oversight, sort of collectivist control over the economy as like an active benefit of it. Like you could do a social wealth fund without UBI, where, you know, it funds the various programs we have right now. It's kind of the back end of it. And the idea is that its own benefits, because if we're democratizing stock ownership, it forces more control. So it's not just, you know, the corporate entity buybacks, because they're no longer the sole, you know, controllers of that.
Well,
we sort of paired it with AI. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you know, I like that idea. And one of the things that I think that ought to happen is we, you know, based on democratic socialist principles, we arguably have a political democracy. I think it's time that we have an economic democracy as well. So we need to look at things where we can get frontline workers into the boardroom of these corporations. So the example that I like to use is, you know, the CEO of McDonald's makes more in a day than the average McDonald's worker makes in a year. Now, if we actually had McDonald's workers on that board, I don't think that they would be rubber stamping that CEO's compensation package, and probably would say, hey, you know, maybe some of that money could go to helping build up a living wage for the rest of us. So if we had a democratization of our companies and getting frontline folks into the boardrooms and having a say, I think that would do a lot to help level this immense wealth gap that we have and help right this concentration, this incredibly obscene, immoral concentration of wealth in the hands of the very few.
Well, a lot of people, especially Andrew Yang and his supporters, see UBI as like an alternative to the jobs that are going to be lost through automation. Where do you see kind of those lost employees getting their money from, or their ability to make a living from, as we move more towards like automated jobs?
Right. So, you know, automation does take away jobs. So does modernization and technology, because, for instance, we don't have elevator operators anymore. But during the time that we did have elevator operators, we did not have high-tech computer engineers at that same time. So, you know, I have faith in understanding that as we move forward, we're going to lose certain types of jobs, but we're going to gain other types of jobs. And at the same time, I think that if we focus on putting putting our resources into investing into people, we can investing in people by way of education, investing in people by having a federal jobs guarantee that say does things like, I don't know, rebuild our entire rail infrastructure. We can create jobs that are non-exportable. We could create ancillary jobs for those jobs as well. Because if we're building a high-speed rail system across the country, that's millions of jobs. On top of that, we could build out universal broadband, public utility broadband on that same infrastructure. And then for every one of those jobs, you're going to spawn other jobs. There's going to be outfitters. There's going to be food service. There's going to be entrepreneurs of all sorts. And I think that as we move forward, I think we can get to a point where people can do what they really truly love, as opposed to pushing paper somewhere, or as opposed to doing some things that are being automated. I think that we can create more creative industries, more creative jobs in the future.
Michaela, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Albert said. I mean, there are jobs that we used to have that we don't have anymore because of modernization. And so it's the same thing that they say about a Green New Deal. Like what's going to happen to all the people who work in the fossil fuel industry. Everything is going to have to come with a just transition. And hopefully, along with other progressive policies like tuition-free college and trade school, that people can actually get jobs that they actually want to do. Because I don't think that anyone, grows up and is like, I want to be a financial analyst for the Navy one day. Like, but those are the jobs that are available.
Yeah.
So if we can just create other opportunities, where people can get the education and actually do things that they really want to do. I mean, jobs are always going to be, lost, unfortunately, because of either automation or modernization. But what we have to do is just figure out ways to keep up with the times and afford other people opportunities so that they can work in fields that they actually want to work in.
Right. So moving on to a question, this is Twitter. Emily asks, what is the first thing you would do if you're elected to the office?
The first thing that I would do is co-sponsor the Medicare for All bill. Most definitely. I think that is so important. Even, we see now that having health insurance based on your employer is not efficient, and it is not helpful for anyone because people are losing their health insurance as they're losing their jobs. And everyone should have health care, period. Because whether you live or die should not be granted if you can afford it. It's barbaric. And I know they said the first thing, but the other thing that I would do is campaign finance reform. I think that that's just as equally important because we can fight for Medicare for all, but if we're allowing corporations like pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies to buy our politicians, it is going to make it that much harder for us to even be able to pass Medicare for all or any of these policies that we're trying to pass if we allow corporate interests to have a say-so in our politics.
Yeah. And if I could just ask a quick question, what is your strategy for campaign finance reform?
My strategy for campaign finance reform, so there are a few things. Like I've been looking into publicly financed elections, along with putting a cap on how much, a super PAC is allowed to dump into your campaign, because dark money flows through those super PACs and no one knows like where all of that money is coming from. And so I think in doing so, there needs to be, I know when you go like on the FEC website, you can see where everyone, donates money to you. But I think that that money should also be public. Should it come from a super PAC, we should know where that money is coming from, and there should be a cap on how much people are allowed to invest into that super PAC as well.
Yeah, I agree with Michaela. We need Medicare for all. This COVID-19 is demonstrating that our employee-based private health insurance system is failing. It is failing us in so many different ways. We have basically millions of people that are going unemployed and in turn losing their health insurance. So I think this is a wake-up call. I think this is a wake-up call to say that the system that we have is not working, that private health insurance is just a parasitic level on top of the taking care of the needs of the people, and especially with a crisis like this where it affects all people. And then if we don't take care of getting help for all people, it will continue. So this is just another argument for single-payer universal Medicare for all. But like Michaela said, money in politics is the root of all of our issues, be it the lack of universal health care, be it the endless wars, be it the immense wealth gap that we have. All of these things are caused because we have politicians that are bought and paid for. We have elite multimillionaire career politicians that have been in for, in my case, 24 years, going on 25 years. In Michaela's case, 40 years, okay? We've got politicians, career politicians that have been there 20, 30, 40 years, and they're all on the take, okay? We need to get citizen representatives. In order to do so, you need to overturn Citizens United. You need to have publicly financed campaigns. These are two things that my incumbent talks about. He says it on his website. It's lip service progressivism because he says he wants to overturn Citizens United. He says that he wants to have publicly financed campaigns to get this, diversify our leadership. Well, I'm here. I'm ready to diversify our leadership. You can step down. Seriously. And during the 24 years that our incumbent's been in office, his net worth went from 500,000 to somewhere between 10 and 16 million dollars, a 20-fold increase over the course of 24 years. Whereas the rest of the district, our net worth has remained flat. And if you're coming from a marginalized community, your net worth has actually declined. 24 years of our incumbent's been really good for the incumbent, but it hasn't really been that great for the rest of us. Now, getting money out of politics, I think, is going to get us to having single-payer Medicare for all, because and going to have us to get to a Green New Deal. It's going to get us to all of these things because you'll see that you'll stop having the same types of people coming into office. The people that want status, the people that want money. If you can't get rich from being in office, then why be there? Unless you actually want to do the people's work. So I think that that would be the first thing that I would tackle is money in politics. Of course, sign on to the Medicare for All Green New Deal, yes. But getting money out of politics has got to be first in order to get more citizen representatives in. Now, there's another thing I'd like to do is I'd like to get in HR 4000, which is the Fair Representation Act. That talks about ranked choice voting, which will help to break up this duopoly between Democrats and Republicans. It will help to have true representation within districts, having multiple representatives within a district so that, here in our district, we're 80% Dems, but we got 20% Republicans. Those 20% that are Republicans, they're just not getting represented as well. If we had multiple representatives, ranked choice voting, we could get a wider variety and we can get more representation for all the folks within a district. So I invite people to take a look at HR 4000 as well.
I think that's going to do it for us today. We're coming up on 1 hour, so I just want to give both of you a chance to plug your websites, let people know where they can contribute to you, both financially or with their own time and resources.
So if anyone would like to get involved with our campaign, you can do so at michaela2020.com. Whether you want to volunteer or whether you would like to make a contribution, that is the hot spot for that. We do phone banking every single day of the week, so feel free to sign up for as many shifts as you want to. And please bring a friend and have that friend bring a friend as well.
Likewise, our primary is May 19th, okay? Here in Oregon, if you're in the 3rd district, again, I invite you to, I know for some of you don't want to become a Democrat, but if you really want to have a choice, by April 28th, register as a Democrat to vote in May, because the decision is made in May, not November. I invite you to take a look at any information you'd like at albertlee2020.com. And, you know, feel free to reach out. We have contacts there. And I personally answer as much as possible. And if not, you'll hear from folks like Sam.
All right, I want to thank you all for watching and listening. I want to thank both of our candidates for the sacrifices they've made for our democracy. And I want to thank you, Dash, for joining us as well. All right, I think that's going to do it for us today. Have a good one.